Welcome to Alexandrians with Daniel Karim, where I interview authors, both living and dead ones, with the power of AI. Today's guest is Saad Saeed, an ex-unicorn founder, serial entrepreneur who built and exited many ventures successfully. He is one of Germany's legendary builders, and I'm very happy to speak to him. Today, he leads as the founder and CEO Layla.ai, an AI travel platform that has planned over 1 million trips already and is disrupting the industry altogether with their agentic approach. Before that, Saad co-founded Flink, Europe's fastest growing grocery delivery startup, scaling from Berlin, where I'm right now also, to over 100 locations worldwide, thousands of employees, and $250 million in funding within the very first year alone. In our conversation, we explore how to predict the future, the psychological makeup of a unicorn founder, and the art of reinventing yourself after you've achieved your big dream. Please enjoy this conversation. And if it speaks to your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with other Alexandrian spirits. Welcome to the podcast, my friend. Thanks so much for making room for this.
Thank you for having me, Daniel.
Yeah, we talked about our common friend Asfanjar in a second, and you mentioned that you guys know each other from way back. And one of the things that at the podcast I'm interested in is not only the stories of authors and founders, but also where their journey began. And you have such a particular name. I wanted to ask you about the meaning and the story behind your name, so to say. In my culture, it's always interesting, like names come with a story also in a way. I wanted to ask you, what's yours?
Yeah, so the name basically means spreader of happiness, and it's a very common name as well in Pakistan. So I think names definitely influence people a little bit, and for me, might have even pushed me a little bit to try to be a bit more unique, because in my classroom, there were 4 people with my name, and one was even having the similar last name.
Oh, interesting.
So I think it's a name in Arabic that means spreader of happiness.
Yeah.
But extremely common name in Pakistan.
One of my uncles is I'm half Lebanese, so it's like my father came over from Lebanon, and their names, they always give it to you as some kind of omen of like, and I think it affects behavior very much. And so you said it pushes you to be more unique. Without kissing your ass too much, you're certainly one of the most unique individuals in the world. Otherwise, like you just spoken about VCs, and behind your LinkedIn bio, for instance, says ex-unicorn founder, and to a certain degree, everybody's trying to find that unique founder right now. So I wanted to ask you why you became somebody who managed to stand out. Why was this important for you to go on this journey, so to say?
Thanks so much. I mean, I think I had ever since getting my first job, which was at a startup, where I joined as an intern, and I had no clue in life what to do. I had very bad grades in my university, so I had very low self-esteem as well in terms of myself and what I could do, because grades could never really motivate me to do something, and I could procrastinate to death. So when I joined that startup, I was like an empty bottle, where I was like, I want to understand what I want to do. And what I love about joining an early stage startup, which is growing, is that you have all the possibilities on what you could try to do. And that's where there's a startup called Creditech in Hamburg, which was the fastest growing startup of Germany back in 2014.
Yeah.
And that really gave me a little bit of an understanding of what I wanted to do, because it allowed me to work in data science, in software engineering, in product, and in marketing, and in corporate finance. And really understanding that for me, I'm a person who's kind of a jack of all trades, but master of none. And what motivates me is building products and actually seeing a problem, figuring out a solution to it, and then seeing actual users use that product where their problem is being solved. That is where I'm in my flow mode and really do stuff without having external motivations or some deadline pressures or so on, which, to answer your question, was what kind of led me down that path of what I want to do. And what I realized was to build products, I need to, where my ideas can actually be realized. I need to make this within a structure. I need to be able to understand how to raise capital for it, how to get a team also sold on the idea, and then execute on it, which basically in essence is what really what a business is, which then basically led me down this path to understand, okay, if that is something that I really love doing.
It's one of my strange theories that is not fully tested is that great founders for me often develop superpowers through nexus events or something where they almost sometimes I feel creating a mirror wall that is very rich in something that they at some point were deprived of. And like, for instance, like I'm building Alexandria right now. This is way to communicate across generations and to talk to people even after they died. And the reason for me is I had moments in my life where nobody believed in me, and my father was one of the very first people who believed in me when the normal teachers and the world gave up on me. And I kind of would be beautiful if everybody had somebody who backs them in a way. In regards to you, what do you think is a superpower you develop, and what do you think is an early stage deprivation that led you to become particularly rich in a skill or a virtue or in how to think through a particular problem? Does the question make any sense?
It definitely does. And I think you're right as well. There's a very funny saying that VCs are really trying to find traumatized early stage founders, because that's one of the biggest predictors of success. It's not how intelligent you are or how charismatic you are. It's basically how much of your childhood have you been deprived of a certain thing where you have a chip on your shoulder.
Really against the thing, actually.
It is a thing because they did a lot of research on like what makes a successful founder, and you could kind of go towards like hard work, integrity, intelligence, a lot of different factors. And actually the one that actually stood out was what kind of trauma do they have from their childhood that they're really trying to now go against. So I think that's definitely a valid question. And if I reflect back onto my past, I think growing up in a military family, in a country where it's not really easy to question things, in growing up in a family where we had a lot of rules and so on, it definitely created a bit of a rebellion inside me to question authority, not to really take how things are. And that's, I think, been one major factor in where it's very hard for me to work for someone, especially when I don't see credible authority or where I'm not being given the freedom to do stuff. So that, I think, was definitely one thing that's really pushed me to work hard so that at least my ideas can be realized.
It's interesting. I thought would you say that a resistance to authority is one of the ingredients that makes you super founded?
I
Definitely in some form of relationship.
Yes, I think your entire life, you are forced to conform. You're forced to conform from society, from your teachers, from your parents, from the government, from police, on every certain different issues. And if you don't conform, you are ridiculed, punished, ostracized from society. So in order to expound a business which is going to be different from where the norm is, you need to have this resilience to rebel against the status quo. And if you don't have this, it gets very hard, because the number one hurdle that you will face while starting a business is everyone telling you it's not going to work because it's not what the standard practice is. And if you don't have that rebellious nature in you to say, no, I still believe in myself and I will go against what the common perception is, it becomes super hard.
It's very hard. One of the reasons why I named my company Alexandria was because I envisioned a city where all the sovereigns, the revolutionaries, the pioneers live after they made their contribution. And I asked myself, what would a citizen of such a city be like, and how would they treat each other? Because for me, going after my dreams or more like my task has not improved my life personally in some ways. I've got of rejections and losing all your money, and the girlfriend leaves, and you get kicked off from school. And I always imagine that there's a secret community of people who've experienced this in some or even more activated version. If you think about Galileo, for instance, it's like these old pioneers from hundreds of years ago. Like if they come up with a new idea, it's not like they were rewarded for it. They were often persecuted for the same people in insane times, sort of saying this is how the future was being built. And military background, I think that's another thing we also share. Ilham, how has this influenced you?
I would say it definitely has taught me that you can't take things for granted just because the way that they are, because I come from a country where the military really runs the country.
Yeah, right.
And there's a lot of beliefs that we have within the whole space because there has been an orchestrated effort to make sure everyone believes that. And within the military family, of course, it is to the extreme where you all believe that as much as possible. And I think coming to Germany really starts for someone who comes from Pakistan, helps you question a lot of that. And that was the first point to kind of say, okay, a lot of different beliefs which I held to be true, they weren't true. What else is also not true that I've taken as a part of my value system because of some sort of effort from some organization to make me believe those things. And then that leads you down a path to question a lot of things. And this is a dangerous path as well because there's no end to it. And it can get you a bit lost. But it also...
There's a scene in the Matrix where after Neo needs Morpheus and decides to take the Replo and get out of the Matrix, the first place they go through is this simulation room, which is empty, and then they go to the desert of the True, where he sees things for what they are. And what I find interesting is that once a belief gets broken down or you overcome it, it's not like you immediately things get better. You go to this tale where the old story is not supporting you anymore, and you often have a year where you need to reconfigure yourself. In old stories, this is often manifested as Moses leading the Israelites out of the Pharaoh land, and they go to many generations through a desert before they find promised land. So it's like after you find truth, it's not like you get an immediate reward. It's usually things get worse first before they get better. And psychologically speaking, soldiers are almost the exact opposites of farmers, which is very interesting. Like they're just trained to follow orders and do the kind of things. And where an entrepreneur doesn't accept any kind of rules, at least to a certain degree, and it seems that hierarchy is being formed later. What was like a Morphean figure in your past who sparked this exploration for you? Or do you think you were just born like that?
I would say there's definitely a lot that a soldier and an entrepreneur can take from each other, because they definitely have the discipline that is also required to basically succeed as a founder. And as a founder, you're going to be faced with a lot of contradiction. And navigating that contradiction is going to be your entire life. One example of that is such as you would need to have extremely strong beliefs that are very loosely held, which means, yes, you should be very confident in a certain idea, but as soon as you see that the reality is different, you need to adapt to that as well. And this is where a lot of people make this mistake, because yes, you're told to question, yes, you're told to rebel and think differently, but you become too arrogant in a certain space to then stay with that belief, even though the reality is completely different.
Yeah.
And understanding where in your belief set you have to be steadfast and belief in yourself, and which things you should actually change, is one of the most difficult things as a founder that you'll end up doing. Because of course you can't be accepting the naysayers that are saying it's not going to work, because any business you start, which is fundamentally different from what the status quo is, most people are going to say it's not going to work. But then you also need to question when you get proof of certain things on how it's not working, and then basically adapting very fast to that. So I feel that's one of the quandary which is very complex to navigate, but a big predictor of a successful founder.
One of the most inspiring conversations recently I had with you and Aspenger at 1 o'clock in the morning viewers very recently, where we were at this table exploring criteria for when to leave the business. Just like it's very hard actually to know like when to pivot and when to just power through. If you would maybe create like a standard operating procedure for founders to navigate through tough times, what were some of the questions you would add to it, or what would be some of the things you would like to them to have access to?
I would say it really depends. I mean, in terms of the structure of the foundation, to have a successful business, the formula in theory is very easy. Predict how the future is going to change. Prepare yourself for that change, that when that change happens, then you are in the ideal situation to capitalize on it. As an example, when we were starting out Flint, we had a very strong core thesis that grocery delivery is going to rise at an enormous pace within Germany. People will be ordering online much more than what is the norm. And we want to be in the best position that when that consumer behavior becomes mainstream, then we are in the ideal position to really capitalize on it. So you are preparing for the future in a sense. The question really becomes, how much are you willing to stay in that long-term game till that consumer change has happened? And how much is your belief of how big that consumer change is going to be? One example is, let's say, virtual reality. Meta has invested billions on the bet that virtual reality is going to be the norm and the interface that we're going to go and deal with. And they're willing to lose money over it because they have a very strong belief that this will be the big change that's coming. Now, it will be in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years is the question. And you have to also ask that question to yourself. The change that you are wanting to capitalize, because you cannot start a business on a consumer behavior that has already become mainstream. You will never beat the incumbents, the big companies on that. You can only succeed if you're working on a consumer behavior change that is small right now, that the big players don't actually care about, but it will become mainstream in a very near future. Of course, the more rapid the change is, and the more you can be completely best set up for it, the faster the success for you is going to happen. And that is the only question that you need to be asking yourself. Because it's basically a very clear formula of how much do you expect the industry to change? How fast do you expect it to change? And how much are you willing for yourself to invest in it while seeing no results? And can you sustain that?
I think that's one of the best things anybody ever said on this podcast. And how do you predict the future? Like, what is if we go to step one, and I will say that me personally, I arrived there at accident, but it's like for me, it was like more, my father got sick through an assassination attempt, and I thought like, how can I keep talking to her? That was like my question that drove me to this. But it seems there are people like you who are almost like professional futurists who make a profession out of this, where they don't have this specialization. How do you come up with a trend, or how does your brain work in regards to getting this glimpse into what is about to happen? Does this question make sense, or is it?
Yeah, no, I think that's very valid, because here lies the key. And of course, this is being done by stock traders, economists. Everyone's trying to predict the future. If you can, there's infinite amount of capital that awaits you. And building a business is just one way to capitalize on it, of course.
Yeah.
But in essence, what everyone, such as the Warren Buffetts of the world or so on, what they're all trying to do is they're trying to predict the future and the trends are going to happen and how long lasting they are. Now comes the question of how do you start to predict the future, and whether fringe behavior will become mainstream or not. For example, musically, infamously became TikTok, which became extremely mainstream. As a creator, it would have made a lot of sense back then to come and capitalize on Musically and make a lot of short vertical video content over there. And whoever did, of course, reaped a lot of benefits. So as a founder, you need to really think a bit more high level into this whole stream, and based on these trends, come up with certain solutions that would be solving these problems. Now, try to figure out how this would happen. There are a few different multiple ways. Of course, one way is you think about what is the young generation doing, because as soon as that young generation has more purchasing power, they will be the ones defining how that industry looks like. So, for example, if they are watching a lot of shows on Netflix and so on, you can kind of understand that as soon as that generation of which we are, when we were going to be growing up much more, we will not be watching traditional TV, but we will be watching a lot of Netflix, Disney, and all of those different forms of entertainment. And investing in that makes a lot more sense. So one example is really young to old, but of course that's a much longer time frame. The other one is you could kind of have a feeling of it as well, from your personal gut feeling, that if you use a product, and how amazed are you at it yourself? And do you feel like not a lot of people have used this, and that is the only reason why they have not adopted it? Because you very strongly believe that if a lot of people use this product, it will go mainstream. So that's the second kind of gut feeling, where you kind of experience it yourself and you feel, wow, my job is to just get this into the hands of as many people as possible. And then the third one, you could just see what has worked in different markets and whether that will come within your market or not. For example, the current company that we're working on right now, it's a lot of how to leverage social media for travel, which has worked amazingly in China, because in China, social commerce is super well advanced. But in the West, it's in travel especially, social commerce has not really exploded. So humans are quite similar in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
That helps.
The fascinating. It's almost like to do the word that comes to mind is like prophetic positioning in a way where you can either investigate the future or you can go outside of the market that you're in. And I was always surprised when I would live in Bangkok for a while, and I love these 7-Eleven stores. Have you ever been in one?
Yeah.
It's like you can make the sandwich and they make it warm for you. It's like, it's a small thing, but it was so much better than going to where I was from in Hamburg, where I grew up, to go to a place where you could just buy your steak or something. Like everybody would be able to love to having their own sandwich right now. It's like very interesting how traveling either vertically or horizontally can come up with new ideas. And okay, how do you design profits? Where this idea you would create the Frankenstein founder who's able to, because I found that it also takes a very special psychology and characterological makeup to create somebody who's actually able to endure this march of listening to a song that nobody else in the beginning listens. How would you create something like somebody like this from scratch? What would be some beliefs, some habits, or some virtues, or some assets or skills that you would implant into this kind of person?
That's an interesting question. I would say,
Or the question would be, how do you recognize a unicorn founder?
I would say the few traits would be A, they have to question everything of why it is what we do and why does it have to be that way. Because most of the times we do stuff out of habit, and if we had another solution, we would be doing that instead. But of course, changing habits require a lot of momentum. And to create that, you need something that really moves you. So it really needs to be worth it. So first of all, questioning everything of why that happens, and will that be the norm if they had another option. And then secondly, going very deep into finding what would it take to change that habit that people have. And then just iterating on that belief set constantly with action, by doing tons of experiments and figuring out, okay, now I've done this experiment. Did I actually see that consumer behavior shift happen or not? And is it viable or not as well? So those are, I think, one of the main things, because to become a unicorn founder or so on, you would have to be changing the lives of millions of people. Let's say a billion might be a bit too much. With say 10 million, you already depends on how much you're impacting them, because it's just a ratio of how much do you impact. Either it's like a billion people very less, or 10 million people but very drastically. And you just need to then work that backwards of what is that behavior that's going to change drastically within these 10 million people, and can I catalyze that change or not?
Assume you're talking to a founder who, by chance, tuned into the music of something where he's working on the same problem. He identified correctly where the world is going to change, and his idea is about to take off. Like, what would be some advice you would give from one unicorn founder to the next? I would say, like, this is about to happen. Here's some things you can armor yourself with that maybe you would have liked to have in the beginning of that chat. Does that question make sense to you?
No, I think for sure, because you need to be constantly reinventing yourself, because the challenges that you face in the start require very different solutions to the challenges that you face when you are scaling, for example. And building up the right structures around you is super critical to your success, because at the end of the day, if you do not have a certain set of structures that keep you grounded and allow you to adapt and help you see whether you're doing, how you're performing on as yourself and not as the business, you'll come crashing down pretty fast. So understanding what are the exact challenges that are being faced, and then what would be the structures that would help you face those challenges in the best way, would be something that one really has to think about. Because the challenges that you're facing when, for example, you are figuring out what the right idea is very different in terms of the people that you need, in terms of the capital that is required, in terms of the scale of the experimentations, compared to now I know exactly the idea or the exact business model, and now I need to scale this as well. So understanding the exact challenge that's required and what is the structure that you personally will be putting around yourself to help you make decisions, to help you reflect and understand how to adapt and change, are super important.
You guys also pulled off some of the greatest fundraising runs in think all startups that ever existed. It was kind of wild. I think it's like, how do you feel? What advice would you give somebody who's raising? And what was something you learned from being a part of this crazy adventure about raising people?
Yeah, I think
Do you think you now have that maybe prior you didn't have it before you raised?
fundraising is, first of all, it's definitely a lot on how much are you capitalizing on a current trend where all of the capital is interested in. Like for example, right when COVID happened, delivery was the number one idea. It was either grocery delivery or any sort of delivery or virtual conferences or online dating. These three were, or of course, masks or medicine or any within that space. These four were industries where you, as long as you had an idea that made a bit of sense, you had a lot of capital available because people really understood that they could make a very quick return on their capital. When COVID finished, you had a very sharp decline on these last mile logistic companies, online video conferencing companies. Things example also from these, what was that company's name where you come log in and have virtual conversations?
The company's name for Zoom or
No, Zoom, there's like another one where you could have online chats and so on. It went up and now it's gone down completely as well.
okay, I can only think of Zoom or something. I just know. Yeah. Okay. So there was like a connection between the world was in an abnormal state and people capitalize on it. And so it's like when investors saw that there was an immediate opportunity for them, they capitalize on it. So yeah, be in alignment with the zeitgeist of the generations of the same.
Exactly, because if you make it easy to ride the wave of capital is always there. It just depends on what industry you're at the moment. And then, of course, there's a lot of different questions about defensibility, having a really strong team, being able to show results fast and so on. But I think before that, choosing which industry you're at a certain time is one of the biggest determining factor of how easy it's going to be for you to raise capital.
I'm very interested also in the idea of iceberg psychology, where it's like you see the outcomes of people, but you don't see the stuff that they did in the dark that develop a kind of character that justified that they could endure being on the mountaintop. What was something that you did during this stage at worst where nobody knew about it, but it was actually foundational to you, to the contribution of this, or to you being able to withstand this kind of pressure that came with it?
I think founding businesses is all about doing stuff without expecting return, or better to put, doing work despite of getting no results. And I've done around more than 150 deliveries myself on a bike, trying out every sort of way of how to deliver with in the cold, in the snow. So I definitely understand how tough it is for the first job. And it's definitely, like you mentioned, of doing stuff in the dark that helps you understand what it's going to take for something to really work. And as a founder, you basically need to be doing all of the dirty work, because you will be doing endless amount of work which will not give you any monetary results in the start. And you have to be okay with that. If you come up with very high expectations that I need to do this and I need to see results very early monetarily, it's going to be very hard for you to succeed, because there will be a long time period where you don't see that. If you judge success from the lens of money, but if you judge success from the lens of learning, then it's very rewarding, because every action that you take if you properly reflect on it, you learned something out of it. So it was successful. Even if you failed in all of the dimensions of, you didn't get any customers, users acquisitions, money, etc., etc. So there's a lot of work that goes in the dark within that space. And I think usually you only get rewarded for your success when you've already succeeded since a long time, but external success comes much later, and you cannot be judging with that lens at the start.
Very interesting. I love that you are describing not only to what to do, but how to go through it. The ethos is like one of the beliefs that has served me well is leading my venture like I'm already dead, as where I don't need anything anymore from this, where the idea that this exists is rewarding themselves for me. I'm so inspired by people of the past who, I don't know, like some of the inventors of humanity had is like 400 years later, like people started to use what they have come up with, and I always feel like if you only do for stuff that you get paid by tomorrow, it's a very, you're a child, you're not a leader to some degree. If you could put like a message on every coffee mug in the world of the founders who are in that first stage where they do the deliveries themselves, where they don't have a big office yet, they do it in the podcast, like here, what was like something you would write to them as a mantra or something to look at it every day or something like that. Something to not lose track of me.
I think there's a lot of different mantras out there that speak to each different people differently, but I would say maybe the one that can help you sustain that initial hardship would really be to only think about, do you know more about how to make this successful, whatever venture you're doing, than yesterday? And that is the only thing that matters. Because in the grand scheme of things, if you definitely come up with, first have these inspiration or motivation that, I'm doing this because I want to be a millionaire, or I want to go ahead and change the lives of millions of people or so on, that task is so daunting that you will constantly feel that you are failing. Yeah. So if you reframe that and you'd only make it that, have you learned more about your venture than yesterday? And if that's yes, you're doing great. If no, what do you need to change? Still, you don't plateau.
I love this. It's like, how do you protect the myth that is governing you? Because I grew up as a basketball player, and basketball is also one of those things where the time between you starting to learn the craft and you getting paid for it is a decade in between. And I see many talented people lose love for the game because it was just too far away. But those who I saw succeed would be those who had played these internal incremental games with themselves on being a little bit better than they were yesterday. And they would even like track it down. And as long as it didn't fall out of love with the games we were saying. What was, you think, your biggest test of your leadership in regards to your entrepreneurial career?
I think for leadership, it's the two biggest values that I see are, how can you inspire people to work on something that is bigger than themselves? And that is extremely hard to do. Because if you want to convince someone to work on something which they need to put even before themselves, it needs to be a big vision. Yeah. It needs to be exciting enough that they say it's worth it. And we collectively are going to buy into this vision and make this even something before our, let's say, personal interest directly. But the interest of the vision will basically ultimately also be in the interest of ourselves, but in the long term. So that is something which is extremely hard to do. And then managing those or keeping that up when you already, as the stakes get higher, is an extremely difficult test. because as the stakes get higher personally, it is so easy to bring yourself before the group. And ironically, if everyone starts doing it, you will also fail, because as soon as the group fails, you also fail. But of course, we're selfish human beings. Well, that's how we've evolved and actually survived. So maintaining that is one of the hardest things to do, because you need to navigate through a lot of complex personalities, structures, incentive settings, conversations with different people about their time and effort that they're putting in terms of the compensation that they're getting as well, and how that ties into the bigger picture is I think one of the biggest tests that a leader goes through.
What story comes to mind, or a moment of your life when you think of the word and pressure? The image that I came to my mind is like when you go up Mount Everest, the oxygen comes less and less. But there are certain people who are able to make the pilgrimage and come down to tell the tale of what it's like upstairs. What was a moment where the stakes were on and where you visibly felt like, okay, this is there's a lot of pressure from your side. Any moment that comes to your mind?
I would say it was definitely when we were scaling up Flink. We reached to more than 10,000 employees within the first year. I had an enormously fast scaling business, going from 0 to millions of users within a couple of months, opening up new warehouse and no sleep, countless hours of work, a lot of different pressure. But I think the success keeps you going. But as soon as you have, let's say, like a big setback, that's where you can be extremely hard on yourself, and it really kind of brings you down. And I think one of the moments I remember was I was in charge of auto technology, and technology is one thing where you can easily spot a mistake. So because it's very visual, as soon as there's a bug, everybody knows there's an issue, which is very different in marketing, because in marketing, if you mess up, you basically realize that the spend did not really bring you the same results in a couple of weeks or so on. But in tech, it's instant. It's in microseconds where you can see that the whole system is down. And this was at a stage where we had scaled up nationwide, had hundreds of warehouses, and had a complete nationwide shutdown of our business because we weren't ready to scale that fast. We basically were the fastest growing company of the world at that time. So, and we were not prepared for it from a tech perspective because we went way too fast. And it was basically like a sinking ship with a lot of holes that we had to kind of take the water out at the same time while repairing the different holes in that ship as well. And there was definitely one moment where we basically had big presentations to investors, and we were launching, and everything collapsed. And at that moment, as you can imagine, the stakes are extremely high, and you have thousands of people, such as the riders that are going and delivering in Wiesbaden, remote areas of Germany that completely are stuck. You have warehouse people that are packing groceries, and now suddenly all of them have no idea what to do and are just stuck. And at this moment, the panic just multiplies, because it starts bottom up. It goes to the manager, and basically till the time it reaches to you, it has amplified exponentially, and the buck stops with you at that time, because there's no one that you can go and complain to. You have to now be the one to solve all the problems. You're the problem, so you're the firefighter. You're not the one who can now actually go and ask anybody for help and so on. And I think at that time there was definitely a lot of pressure that was put in. And I think it was also very helpful because same thing as say pressures makes time is you need to go through that to face it because nothing can prepare you for it. No kind of practice.
If you would walk us through the war room, like the meeting of like, it's very funny. Most people who listen to this will never experience this probably. And only the lucky ones, probably, are gonna be in those kind of rooms. What's that like? Like, what were the conversations like? If you would take us back in time, and how did this feel like for you? Because with technology, when something breaks, it's like it's different. Like I'm more like a visionary kind of guy in a way. It was like the vision is not correct. You
won't feel it right.
but if the app is down tomorrow, is all the pressures on you? What was that conversation like, or what? And how did you stay professional in that, or stoic in those kind of situations? What would be some advice for somebody who experiences peak unicorn level stress?
I'd say it's one of the most ultimate fight or flight moments at that time, even though, of course, you're not facing a lion or so on, but emotionally you are, because you have hundreds of people, and most ironically the ones that you trust and love and have basically your own comrades that are coming to you with a lot of stress and panic. And different personalities are going to be expressing it in different ways. So the ones that are very emotional are going to be very flamboyant about it. The ones that are very analytical are going to be expressing it through numbers and so on. And they're all coming at you at the same time, just to kind of, in their own goodwill, they want to help you solve the issue, but they feel the need to express to you of how big the issue is, just to somehow convey at those times, people think that they are helpful by reporting to you how bad the issue is, because they are not in a position to fix it. So the only way that they can help is making you aware of how bad it is. And because they feel helpless at that time, because it's not in their domain, they don't have the exact control of it, they don't understand why it happened, the only way they feel they can help more is by basically making it very clear to you how bad it is. And at that time, you have to, if you have a lack of belief in yourself, it becomes extremely hard. If you have a certain sense of being a people pleaser, it becomes really hard. And if you let other people tell you what to do, it also becomes really hard. Because at that time, you have to take the decision of how to solve it. And to take that decision, you have to be completely pragmatic and not emotional at all, which is one of the hardest things, because you have people coming up to you and people that, you really care about and you're very close to, coming and saying, this is how bad the situation is, it's going so wrong. And you have to not let it affect you so that you can actually take the best decision at that time to resolve it as quickly as possible. So it's definitely not a fun place to be at, but it helps you.
Any kind of personal ritual you had back? I was in this very chair like 3 weeks ago talking to Anita Moore, New York-based founder, CEO, and she gives herself, for instance, a moment to feel all the terror that comes along in those crisis moments, but she stops the time and then she said afterwards she goes into problem-solving mode. And for you, like what's a moment or like something you did where if you have all these black swan messengers knocking at your door after a while, how do you protect yourself from making emotional or immature decisions? Like what was something you personally did? If you look back and it's like pinpoint, Saad was able to preserve his cool, and I think one of the reasons he was able to endure this was because of X. What do you think was something you did?
I would say staying calm under pressure is definitely something that I've learned to do. This,
You would explain to this to your son as like, he's about to inherit the empire, and it's like, this is how you do it.
I would say since an early childhood, I've been around people that have, let's say, overreacted to certain situations. So, since a very young age, I was exposed to that, where people are really taking something which is not as bad it is, but really portraying that it is so. And I think that at an early age instilled in me that people will always overplay how bad a situation is just to make sure that they are heard. So not to take that at that face value, and to just not let it get to you at that moment so that you can stay calm. So I think that was something that has helped me since childhood, where I do go in, if I start to see everyone panicking, my gut instinct or my reflex is to basically shut those emotions down and take a very outsider's perspective towards. And I think that is also what allowed me to then fix that situation super fast, because I did not let myself get into that panic mode, even though afterwards I took time to process it, and it definitely plays a lot on you. But at that moment, you need to be as shut off from these emotions as possible.
It's one of the things that surprised me. I wrote a lot of books about psychology, and I did some counseling while doing those. And one of the things that surprised me is that it is not exactly obvious to people how much emotions they should feel. So when something's wrong, they often turn it all the way up to you, just as you mentioned, to be heard. I think as a leader to know that extracting the message from the messenger seems to be really helpful while you just describe, which is a really good reminder. How do you reinvent yourself? You also mentioned that, I love the fact that you mentioned this, as you're going to different stages with a venture. It's almost like I assumed that you have to become different people. And it seems to me, for instance, like the person I am right now, like aspiring first co-founders, first investors, it seems that this person doesn't have as much in common with the person that I will probably have to be when we have 100 employees, which are sent away. How did you manage this part for yourself also? And what's some advice you would give to people who maybe are in need of letting go of who they were to make room for who they have to become in the best citizen?
I would say one of the biggest ways to do that is first be very, very careful of what you think your identity is. And to that, you have to first even know what you think you are, because everyone has a certain image about themselves. Either consciously, subconsciously, you have now in your mind an understanding of who you are. And most people never reflect on this, even though this is one of the biggest determining factor of what you're going to be doing. Because if you think I am a software engineer that is from France and like to play golf at this time and so on, etc., etc., we subconsciously put ourselves in a lot of boxes, and we constantly then reinforce those beliefs. And the tighter those beliefs come, the harder it is to reinvent yourself as well. And what is super interesting is that our identity is super fluid. Everything from our name to our profession, to the people we loved, to the actions that we do, to where we live, it is completely up to us. But we don't feel like that. We feel massive amount of societal pressure or any sort of pressure, because we as humans want to be comfortable in a certain state. So that's why it's so hard for people to change themselves, because they just believe that they are a smoker, or they are a certain thing. And having growth as one of your identity really helps you to always be in this constant reinforcement that I am someone that is growing, that will always grow and improve.
I don't this. It's almost like a meaningful way of mutating who you are and like make a room for there's the next iteration of me that I have to potentially grow into. And very bad things happen also for me since like I knew a family member of mine who's a professional athlete and he struggled tremendously when this chapter of his life was over because he wasn't able to manifest or conquer a new identity that would allow him to live with dignity in a way. It's like I feel emotions and identity are so closely linked and sometimes can cause the great way of even as a founder when you're like, I have to be CEO. Well, who do you have to be in regards to this vision to be realized? Maybe it's more a different role or something like this. It's very interesting. What happens after you have this big breakthrough? Hey, that's also interesting. What happens when you come down from the mountain? You've had many ventures, also since Flink in a way. What happens afterwards? Particularly you're like super young, and it's like, what happens if you find this one thing that works and changes the world? What comes next, so to say, for you?
I think there's definitely this place where you find yourself where you feel more lost than you were before. Because now you've understood that going after a certain title or status is not going to be the
Let me ask that. What was something you deemed meaningful or valuable before starting Flink or your early center that now as you've won on the biggest stage is utterly meaningless? The scene that comes to my mind was Mike Tyson was once interviewed and he looks at his titles and he say, what does this mean to you? This is garbage. And they have lost all meaning for you. What is something for you that is no longer of value or importance that because you acquired those?
Yes. I think self-validation is something that you learn needs to come from yourself. And I would say I used to be doing startups before to prove to the world that I am worth it. I was craving validation because of certain aspects in your life. You question yourself and you want to feel that you're worth something. And what I really thought was, okay, to prove to myself that I'm worth it, I need to find the unicorn. And that kind of answered a lot.
Was this something that you actually articulate before you went on this journey? I think it was definitely in my range. So it's like you set up the vision, like I want to be, oh wow.
Yes, that was the ultimate goal.
You still remember how you articulated this? And was it a thought you had? Did you write it down or like?
I would say it was really working, first of all, in this startup in the early stages where I saw these founders that were achieving miraculous things and being very inspired by them and really thinking that if I could be like them, I would really respect myself. I would be proud of myself. And if only I can do this, I would have that respect. And
it seems that by itself is a good marker for if I only have X, I will be.
Yes.
Is a good way to spot like maybe this empowering cognitive pattern continuously. It's just
that's I think a really good point because we're craving meaning. We're craving an answer to what we should be doing. What is that will finally bring us meaning?
Yeah.
And I think if you take an ambitious goal, that answers it for a long time because it's going to take you a long time to get to that.
Yeah.
Finally, when you get there, you either realize was that it or not. And I think one of the biggest things was also to understand that you can only get your respect for yourself from yourself, not based on what other people will be saying about you. And that was definitely one thing that allowed me to kind of change and then actually work on things that I would also find meaningful, not just doing stuff because I feel like I can get monetary success out of it.
How has your relationship with money changed over time? And what is something Silicon level founder knows about money that first founder who's eating ramen noodles in WeWork doesn't know yet?
I'd say money definitely can amplify your different emotions that you can have. And in the start, you think that you really need money for, let's say, validation, for certain dopamine effects and so on, like getting a Lamborghini or going on these yachts and so on, which is definitely a lot of fun, but it is very short-lived. So using purely money to achieve happiness by buying stuff for yourself is very short-lived. But using money to basically amplify your ideas into reality is very rewarding and meaningful. And if you can see the impact that you are having on other people's lives, that is a much longer term fulfillment that you can get.
If you would teach your son how to get, if you would write a secret little manual just for your son about how to make money, what would be the first chapter in that?
So that's a good question.
Or maybe that wouldn't even be the first chapter. If you would write a book about money for your chart, what will be the first chapter do you want?
I would say, first of all, really understanding who do they think they are, in terms of why are they in this world? Because you first really need to understand yourself, and it's such a hard thing. It's such a hard thing which most people don't even spend a lot of time on, to purely say, okay, with me as an individual, what is something that I find really meaningful for my life based on my unique circumstances, my strengths, my ideas, and then based on that, how do I start to amplify that? And I think discovering who you are is a very important factor to then giving you the strength and the power to endure hardships that are needed to then gain a lot of capital afterwards as well.
One of the things that gives me a lot of strength that I discovered on my entrepreneurial journey was faith in God in particular. It's when people walked out of me, the idea that like God is my co-founder has served me surprisingly well. What is a belief or a spiritual discovery that you made along the way that you feel gave you the kind of backing no kind of worldly resources like what VC could give you?
I think believing in something bigger than yourself definitely is very powerful, because you will be faced with issues that you cannot explain. And when everything seems like it's not going to work, but every logic would say that it's not going to be how you think it should be, then having something at the back of your mind, or believing in something which is bigger than the world that is we can just understand right now, is definitely very powerful. Understanding what that higher power is and how that God is, I think is definitely very interesting as well. One of the spiritual discoveries that has actually helped me a lot is also, what is the relationship with God that you have? Is it of that where you are constantly worshipping another entity which is very separate to you, and it's more of a, let's say, a one-way relationship where you have to be confessing and professing your love towards this big you entity, or is that entity also within you?
Yeah.
And is that a morphosis of you? And this is one of the things that I think has been super powerful, where a lot of religions, they talk about God being very close to you, so close that is in within your veins. And I think understanding it in that way, that you have the power of God within you, and to worship God, you need to love yourself. And the more you love yourself and treat yourself with respect and kindness, the more you are also professing your love towards God, is extremely powerful. Because then no longer is it a certain entity which is completely outside of you that you are constantly begging for help and forgiveness, but it is an entity that is extremely linked to your entire existence and a part of you that is strengthening you and is your support. And I think that reframing is one which at least personally has helped me a lot.
See, it speaks very close to you can have a religion and you worship it and almost have like cultural enslavement. It's like some people, they go to church and it's almost like they see it as a transactional enterprise where they're feeling going there would maximize my chance for success. But there are other people like here where worship is embodied and finds themselves in behavior. For me, like a true founder is who builds this element of the future that needs to exist. That's a form of having a co-adventure with this is God also, right? In some ways, where you can worship through action and through helping others. And I'm now really quite connected to the religious discipline and just having to do certain things because these are the rules of that particular community, in a way. And what is an uncontroversial belief you have? Something wacky you believe?
Something controversial.
Yeah. A controversial thing that you spend a lot of time thinking about, or something maybe common advice you completely reject out of your industry?
I mean, maybe one of it is following your passion purely is something which is very easy to throw around, but I don't personally believe in it.
Yeah.
I think your passion can be playing the guitar, and if it's not something that you also are talented and gifted enough to do, it's definitely not going to be that rewarding and fulfilling. Because one of the fundamental beliefs that I have is that you will feel fulfilled when you are proud of yourself. And that could be basically based on a mother raising her children in an amazing way, and that was her identity, and that is what she's super proud of. Or a carpenter, building something amazing, or founder building a business, or anything that you really treat as your craft, which you can hone and improve. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a pure passion of yours. And I think too much nowadays it's thrown around like, do what you love. And I think that is, it's made people quite miserable as well, because nobody talks enough about do what makes you suffer, but for a cause that you believe in is much more rewarding than just doing something that you love because you love it.
I hate the modern sarcastic system, the passion, because I feel at some point it got twisted to a point of helping people to get what they want without correcting them if the very thing they want is actually fine. And for me, I feel like I found a lot of clarity in the pursuit of responsibility rather than reward. And Berlin is a great example. I think like Berlin is going through a very spiritual crisis right now, where on our way here, I see that there's in real like fucking 200 years away from this after hours. What is an after hour? An after hour is where people go when the club is finished and they want to continue to drugs and all this kind of stuff. It's like purely what will make me feel good right now, and forming a community around this, which is almost like antithetical to the idea what we discussed early on with like the delay or the abandonment of what doing things because it's your purpose or your particular task to do these kind of things. If you, I'm digressing, if you would give a masterclass on any subject based on where you hear and found expertise, there would be mandatory in every business school in the world to be watched, or any kind of universities. What would the topic be that you would choose to teach? And what would be the first segment to be about?
And this is purely on a business.
No, I just realized actually I like the idea of leadership, but like legacy lectures. Because for me, sometimes I talked to a mechanic the other day, and he was using his lessons on how engines work to teach me why I sucked at relationship. It was surprisingly insightful about it. So you can teach any subject in the world. You have a stage, and what would you teach? And it would be maybe for first semesters out of everybody who partakes in university, whereas university more in a metaphorical sense, like students.
I think just like you mentioned, the crisis that we're going through like right now as our generation, it's definitely not it's not a financial crisis or so on. We have a lot of abundance and that has been generated. We're like diseases and so on, like those we've found a lot of different solutions to. We're definitely going through a spiritual crisis at the moment. And discovering what is your craft and what brings you meaning and how to choose, how to deploy your craft to bring you that meaning is something I feel like we don't talk about enough about, we don't teach people enough about. There's some amazing books on it, but most of the stuff that we do is reactionary. And very few people are lucky enough to know what truly their craft is because they didn't give them enough environments that were completely different, where they were out of their comfort zone and they realized, oh, I'm actually quite good at this compared to the others. Maybe I don't even don't like it that much, but I'm actually really good at this. And you can only figure that out if you try 20 different things and you figure out, oh, that's me, rather than being, go to high school, university, then a job, and then get stuck in that for years. And the second one is, once you know what your craft is, did you just use your craft to obtain things that don't bring you meaning? Or did you actually work on yourself and discover who you are and really reflect on what brings you meaning in life and then try to maximize that? I think these two things is something that would be very important for everybody to kind of think about.
Beautiful answer. One of my favorite authors is Viktor Frankl. Have you read Frankl?
Yes.
As he's one of the authors, and he was, for those who know him, he was a Jewish therapist who, among many things, deported to Auschwitz, and he would find people in Auschwitz, and he was seeing this whole experience as an opportunity for him, because it's like, what better place for a therapist to be than in this dim and miserable place? He would find people who were on the brink of despair and giving up, and there people would run into the fences sometimes because they would get shot by the guards, and he would find people who were on the edge, and they would often say, Victor, when you approach him, I have nothing to expect out of life anymore. He would counter it. The objection is like, could it maybe be that life is expecting something out of you? Which aligns perfectly with what you just said, the idea of not asking, what do I want, but why am I here? And what is this skill maybe that I could have or develop or deploy in order to find unique responsibilities that are just mine to take care of? And he would have then conversations and find out there's maybe family member who nobody would take care of, but they wouldn't do it. Maybe it was a book nobody else will write because nobody is interested in it. And I like the idea of like unique responsibilities that otherwise would be neglected. Like, what is a book or a particular form of philosophy that really has impacted you on your way? I mean, what is your relationship with books or education? So
Yeah, I think after universities definitely fell in love with actually listening to books. I have a bit of ADHD. It's hard for me to kind of really just open up and read, but listening to books, I can be doing a lot of different things and keep on intaking that knowledge. Viktor Frankl, the Art of Meaning, definitely is one that impacted me a lot, just like you mentioned, because
How has it impacted you?
I think it was at a time where I was quite confused about what is the meaning of my life.
Yeah.
Because I always thought, though, what is it about? Is it just about money? Is it just about getting happiness? Is it just about optimizing for dopamine? Then you can take a heroin shot and you've maximized it super fast. So why do we get up in the morning and I should go through this? And I think over there it was an extremely important book because, just like you mentioned, in a concentration camp, it is the most difficult question to answer of why should I still live in such horrible conditions, and when life is so grim. What is the meaning of my life? Why should I still fight to survive? And what you just mentioned right now was so beautiful, which is your life has meaning because you are so unique in the terms of how you can impact this world. And the fact that he fought so that he could tell the tales of everything that he learned gave him so much meaning in his life. And I think that's what made me understand a lot about myself and how unique I am as an immigrant that comes from a country which doesn't have a much to a country which has a lot to offer, and how I can impact certain ways and certain people, and what are the different unique sets of that I have, how I can impact my friends and family. I think that was really motivating, because then it sent me down this journey to really understand who I am. Because we are all so unique, but we completely forget that, because we give ourselves titles. Oh, I'm a software engineer. I'm a senior performance marketing manager. And there are 1 million other senior performance marketing managers out there, and you just think, oh, that's just who I am. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. And afterwards, there's this very good book, the Big Five for Life. And that's also a really good book because it kind of gives you the analogy of a safari, that if you go to a safari, you measure how good your life is based on how much of the big five did you see, the giraffe, the elephant, the lion, the hippo, and so on. And that's how you judge how good the safari was. If you saw none of them, you had a terrible safari. If you saw a lot of them, it was a really good one. And then it asks, if you were on your deathbed, what would be the 5 things that you really would have loved to have experienced a lot, that you would have said, that's an amazing life. I really liked this life. And that kind of puts it in perspective of, okay, what were those 5 things that I feel really meaningful, happy, want to maximize in my life? And then you can kind of shape yourself around it.
I love that we started this podcast with you mentioning that one of the things that made you stand out was many people had your name, but you were interested about adding the meaning to your name based on your own personal journey, so to say. What would you say now, knowing what you know? What do you think is your meaning, and do you feel we've accidentally engineered a society that optimizes for pleasure or for money rather than for people engaging their meaning? Because I've received a lot of weird advice recently. I believe that what I'm working on is exactly what I was born to do, and whatever consequence of me following the dictates of that voice is fine for me in a way. And it's like, but I get a lot of advice for people, for instance, that do this, that you would get more money, or is why you should be not go become a chief revenue officer, set up a company, make a lot of money. But I feel like pursuing my personal task and doing what in my world, what God told me to do, is much more closer to my own philosophy rather than following these other things. What is your relationship with your own meaning these days? What do you think is your task right now?
Yeah, I would say, even as a pretext to that being able to find the meaning of your life, money plays a big role in that. In this day and age, money gives you freedom. And it really depends on you what you do with that freedom, but it allows you freedom to experience exactly the experiences that you want to be having, to even figure out in the first place of what is the meaning of your life. Because if you are pretty strong financially, you're not going to be able to do stuff which is going to really bring you those answers. So sometimes doing things which might not feel meaningful to you or feel like, I mean, grocery delivery was definitely not, I think, why I was, born. Something that I feel I was very super passionate about. It was a problem that I thought that could be solved. But I think solving that problem or the
There are definitely some paths in my day where I'm like,
is not the meaning of my life. But I think
but if I experiment into the myth, I think it's still meaningful, you know? It's like if you have the story, which is like when we talk about the others, if you would write this book for your son or your daughter, and the first chapter is about finding out who they are, that's a story pretty much. And people are able to, also one of the things I discovered from Frankel's Chronicles, is one of the torture methods they had there was they would give people in the camps rice to carry and go back and forth through the camps because it was meaningless. And they felt that this was one of the most torturous things you can do to a human being, is like have them do stuff that is deprived of meaning. But for instance, Nietzsche said, like, if your life has a why, you can endure almost any half. So even if it's the grocery delivery by bike to rain or whatever, if it's serving the story you're writing, it's infused with meaning, right?
definitely.
Interesting. And what is a question you feel you're trying to answer with your corpus of work? That if you would imagine your autobiographies in the writing that, and I'm as a reader discover your life book, what would I feel is that that's a question that drove Saad, that he explored through his actions. Does this make sense?
And just building on the previous conversation that we were also having, discovering who you are is definitely something that drives me, because you only discover who you are when you are outside your comfort zone, or when you achieve the goals that you think will bring meaning to your life. Because then only can you know, is this it or do I need to change? So building up the structures put in place to help you answer, who am I, is definitely the question that is definitely on my mind a lot.
I love this. And then also like you're integrating who could I be? It's like, right? It's like for me, one of the things that inspires me about you is this: came from Pakistan, came here, and became a unicorn web founder. You continue your journey, and it's, Carl Jung, for instance, he had this idea, or thing he called an individuation. The idea that the purpose of your life is that your ideal version already exists, and your actions are chiseling away unnecessary marbles, so to say. Is that people generally maybe underestimate like what they could be if they actually follow these impulses, go crushables, and start these kind of ventures. And what would be a message for somebody who's about to join from a foreign country to go to Germany to make their own luck, so to say, or pursue their calling? What would be some advice for somebody who's at the very beginning of that journey?
I'd say Germany is a country with amazing opportunity. This is a country where you do not institutionally have any barriers to what is possible. There are a lot of other countries such as, Saudi Arabia or so on, where you can't get the nationality. It's very hard for you to actually start owning pieces of land, etc. Germany is a country where you can integrate within the society, coming as an immigrant, and where hard work is rewarded because they have a merit-based system.
A merit-based system. And this week, like, let's talk about current leadership a little bit before we move to the last sector. Yesterday in New York, mayor won, which is like, what's his name again?
Zoran Gomdani.
Yeah, interesting. And there were some funny memes ruminating on the internet, showing him as a more of a socialist or communist kind of person, which is a not merit-based system, which is like based rather on an equity, where we have the top-down government and they are reorganizing how things are. And what do you make of the current leadership in the United States right now? And who's maybe somebody that inspires you, and who is somebody that worries?
Yeah. I would say if the job of a politician is to express the concerns of the people, then Mamdani has done a phenomenal job of expressing to the entire system over there what the people want. And that's why he was also able to win such a large majority, because he really zoned in on what are the concerns of the people, how to execute them. I think we will see as soon as he starts to take in action. But doing what he's been able to do has been inspiring for sure. It's 33 years old and has basically not come from a very wealthy family or so on. It didn't have the backing for a lot of billionaires. So I think he can definitely be one. Certain aspects of him can be inspired over there. I think the politicians that are using xenophobia, hatred, fear to gain influence over people, it's definitely very effective. But that is definitely what's concerning as well, because at the end of the day, it's very easy to keep people divided and keep them hating on each other to make the focus completely go away from actual issues that are facing them.
It's very interesting that we also spoke a lot about your appreciation for the Socratic character of a man, just to question everything, all right? And I think lots of these parties in America, they are like, much rather than searching for the truth, it's like battling different cults or communities where you're not allowed to question why things are being done anymore. So it feels that your entrepreneur journey has equipped you with something that may be also an antidote that the world is in dire need of. Have you ever flirted also with the idea of, at some point of your journey, getting into politics yourself?
I would say maybe not directly in that sense, but definitely would be looking into supporting different causes that I think could make sense.
Just this. And who taught you about leadership?
I think it's what are different online role models that have been there. One is definitely a famous cricketer that we had in Pakistan, which is Imran Khan.
Huge in Pakistan.
He's very big.
How many people will watch Big Four?
And so,
It's bigger than soccer in Germany, I think, right?
yes,
Yes.
it's a bit of a religion over there. But I think the way that he's able to...
What's his name?
Imran Khan. So he's been able to build cancer hospitals for free, start universities in areas that don't even have proper education systems and so on. I think it was definitely quite inspirational at a young age to see how he can align people under one vision and achieve a lot of ambitious, almost impossible tasks over there. So I think as a young age, he's definitely someone from Asia that is super inspiring in his journey.
Is this one of the things that drives you also, the idea of like accumulating skills, network, and the finances to do philanthropic ventures later on? It's like, it seems that money for you has found meaning also by how you can potentially allocate it to impact certain problems or causes.
Definitely. I think within the world right now, there's so much that's that bad that's going on that you feel very helpless. And I definitely use that as a fuel to say, okay, even though maybe I can't impact it so much at the moment, but I can work hard to improve my situation to then at one point actually bring some impact into it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think like one of the great misunderstandings of current Western societies, which have become very inspired by all socialistic ideas, is that is empathy and the ability to help others. But the old ideas of, I think, like generosity were more like charity, where productivity plus generosity, or because like I feel like we have a lot of Greta Thunbergian voices in the world who want to give money to others without ever having like produce any kind of wealth themselves in a way. What do you make of this trend of activism in the world? Because you're somebody actually who went the way and learned how to accumulate resources, how to lead a big venture, like you were involved in leadership at the higher sector. And what do you make of this trend that now like students start about thinking how to reorganize the world before they ever build anything? Do you think that they're skipping a few steps?
I personally think activism is definitely very important. Certain issues to raise them, because if we were purely left capitalism, I think we would have a very, very ugly world very fast. Because in the business world, it's all about maximizing profits for shareholders. The humanity aspect of it, it's interesting. It's never a KPI.
So the entrepreneurial sector will not take care. It's good that they are fighting to some degree. These so forced.
Yes, definitely. I think, especially at this day and age, where we have quite a bit of unemployment that is rising as well, AI taking over quite a few different jobs, we will be posed with a lot of questions that are very hard to answer. And business and capitalism would definitely not be the only answers to it, but it is the most effective way to make people come out of poverty as well. So a mixed approach, and these two fightings of having activists but also people creating value, I think is a very important fight to keep.
Y Combinator flows as its winter batch, or you think next week or something. If you would be one of the interviewers who's looking for the next market of birth or for the next world changer, how would you design these 15-minute meets, and what would be the things you would look out for?
I think one of the biggest for success, of course, is the track record behind. That is the easiest as well. That's why second time founding becomes significantly easier, because even as an investor, that's one of the key items that you want to look at, because you are predicting how a certain individual will perform in high uncertainty, which is one of the hardest things to do, because there are so many unknown variables. And of course, track record is just one in which you can see, okay, he's faced massive uncertainty before and overcame it. But if you see that someone's super young, and then you still need to predict how they succeed in an environment of massive uncertainty, where the challenges posed to them you don't even know right now. You would want to understand what is driving them first. Why do they want to be doing what they're doing? And how do they react to uncertain situations? So, because the business plan, the pitch deck, all of those things they're not a predictor at all for a startup. Because for a startup, your business could potentially change in the next 3 months and you wouldn't know about it. So those don't really matter as an early stage company. What does really matter is, how do you face uncertainty? How do you face challenges that you weren't prepared for? And what are the tools and the structures that you are building up in your business that would help you face those challenges? And how fast is your iteration process of learn?
How do you recognize such a person? How do you spot a unicorn founder for all the VCs listening?
I think that's definitely a super hard thing to do just because the success rate already is so low. But firstly, just questioning what is that one belief of theirs, how they think consumer behavior will change. And do you believe that that is also true or not? And it can't be a belief that everyone thinks is true or already has happened, because then it's too late. So you need to trust is that their belief of that one big consumer behavior change that will happen within a very short period of time is true. And once you both believe it's true, you need to believe that they will be the right person to implement or capitalize on that specific change that's going to happen. Because they might not be the right fit also, even though they have figured out that it is the right consumer behavioral change, but they might not have the skill set or the expertise or the strengths to really nail that exact problem that needs to be solved. So those two things, I think, are one of the things.
I was one of the first people when I had this conversation on the clock here a couple of days earlier, talking about founder product fit, which I feel not a lot of people are actually touching on. How do you know you have founder product fit? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think there are definitely tendencies that people naturally are inclined to that make them really good at it, such as operational businesses. If you're someone that is super meticulous and really cares about the small little details, the boring details, then a logistics business could be really good for you. But a creative business could be terrible for you because you would be a perfectionist in a business that doesn't require perfectionism but chaos. And understanding the kind of person that you are and what you are naturally inclined towards is also super important as well, because maybe a digital business is not the correct one, but an offline business, or maybe not a very mathematical one, but a very creative one is the right fit for you. So understanding that as well, and then really the right industry that maximizes that strength, I think big's a big factor towards founder market fit.
You would sit with a friend when he's all in on his venture and I think it's very difficult also to, as a founder, to even explore the idea that you have been wrong about the venture you got yourself involved in. How would you design this particular conversation on having them explore the idea of what they have picked is a product founder fit for them? And what kind of exercise would you run them through to discover this particular process?
I would say the easiest exercise is to first, while being completely unbiased, think about what is the perfect founder that would just nail your business, the exact business that it is. Does that person need to be extroverted and social with people, or a little bit introverted and spending a lot of time on their laptop within business? Do they need to be very mathematically and analytical, or do they need to be very creative and visual? Do they need to be very good in social marketing, or do they need to be very good with, let's say, programmatic and other ways of marketing? And once you kind of build that out, then being very honest with yourself of whether you are this person or not, and would you naturally be doing these things? Because of course everyone can adapt and change, but for example, if you're in a B2B business, are you already the kind of person that is constantly reaching out to your friends, as an example, for meeting up, taking initiatives? Are you traveling a lot by default already to meet people and so on? If you're not, you're going to have a very hard time doing sales and being a good B2B founder, because that is constant follow-ups with people, being ready to pack up your bags and be in Dubai, New York, Singapore at a moment's notice, take people out, dine them and so on. So understanding the skills required to be the perfect founder in your space, and then not seeing are you naturally inclined to them or not is a good exercise to figure that out.
I love this, and it's didn't make your life very miserable, but trying to play a part that was not written for you.
Definitely.
It's like, and there's also no shame in acknowledging that you have adopted the wrong role, within eventually to find something else, or even say, maybe it takes 5 years for me to become this person and to fulfill this kind of thing, but then it shouldn't be you right now. Maybe you need to engage in an apprenticeship. You found somebody who does this for you. And interesting, if you would write a warning maybe to people who are entering the entrepreneurial world, what kind of warning would you give them? Because this is also, I don't know, very easy to waste your entire life in this sector. Definitely no. You have an idea. It's like, there goes 2 years and all your savings.
I think the warning really is, are you ready to sacrifice everything at that stage to go all in or not? Because otherwise it's literally close to impossible. And if you feel you're at a stage where there are 2-3 variables that you just cannot sacrifice, I would be very cautious to start a new business at that time.
One of the questions that my advisors try to scrap me out of my hiring interviews is, would you be able to die for this? Like, it could be. But I feel like if we're partaking in a venture, that sometimes the price requires to live your life.
That's might be a bit, so that's a lot. But for example, are you willing to completely pack up your life here and move to New York, as an example? Because that really requires you to leave your friends, your family, your favorite gym, your cafe. Are you actually willing to make that decision? And I think that's like a relatively easy one. Like, do you feel you're at a stage where you could literally pack up your life and move to a completely different new place and start from scratch?
Future AI is gonna love you, hey, if I translate my extremism into something that will not get us dude. Okay, you will give a lot of, you've given a lot of counsel to people in regards to your chapter. What do you feel? One of the things I'm afraid of is not having the right questions for the people I'm encountering, because I'm operating out of a belief system where I'm to try to solve X, but I'm completely unaware that this is what I should be thinking about. Me, right now, I'm trying to build a unicorn also in different words for it. What is a question an early stage founder will not ask somebody who has done this and survived to live the chaos? Yeah, does the question make sense, or is it too abstract?
It makes sense. It definitely makes sense.
No, because I'm very afraid of my own ignorance, because I'm like, I don't even ask it's like I'm not even asking questions that I shouldn't be asking. What's a question that a person like me should ask at this stage?
I think one of the biggest misconception that I find in a lot of different people that come to me and ask these questions as well, or so on, is this feeling that you need to have all the answers. And that's just not true. And the feeling of knowing that all these people that have gone and done certain achievements are very average, regular people that had just put in a lot of work and effort and backed themselves is very powerful. Because I'm a very average guy. I've not, I would definitely say there's not a lot of intelligence or any sort of unfair advantage that I think I have over another person at all in terms of intellect or skill or so on. And the biggest learning for me as well, while being in a startup at a very early stage, seeing that startup succeed, was seeing up close that the people running the business and the founders are very regular, average people that just have a lot of belief in themselves and not a lot of fear of what if this happens, what if that happens, what if this happens. They have this belief that whatever happens, we'll figure it out. I back myself to figure this out through some possible way. And I think as soon as you get that we're all very average and we don't, and none of us have the answers, you start to take action and you start to stop being less scared of a very uncertain future.
I know the idea of also when we talked about like how do you spot a unicorn founder, is how is this person operating when they don't have all the answers or not all the data first brings us to faith. It's like this idea of being nimble about what to do next and firm on the vision. Very interesting. And let's move. I want to be respectful of your time also to the last part of the interview. I call this Alexandrian questionnaire. It's just a couple of questions, particularly for authors, but author is more, the word author comes from Latin. Auctorem, it means founder, originator, pioneer. So for me, there's multiple ways that you can write a book. And one of them is to actually start a venture. So the questions are about words and books and all that kind of stuff. You can just intuitively ask them from what comes to your mind. What's your favorite question?
I think what makes you in a flow state?
Your favorite word?
The word is Celia, but that's only because that the big 5 things for me in life that I, after that book, did a lot of soul searching and so on, figured out were I'm in a flow state when and by flow state, I mean I lose track of the surroundings and all of my thoughts, and I only get focused on that. And I do that basically when I'm creating something, when I'm enabling something, when I'm doing something out of love, or when I'm improving myself, or I'm taking action on a certain knowledge that I've done. And those 5, basically, their acronym is Celia. So that is the word that's pretty close to me.
Your least favorite words?
Favorite word would be, it's an interesting one. I've never really thought about a specific word, but I think whenever somebody says it depends, it's a bit of a triggering one for me.
A book that changed your life?
The Big 5 for life.
Who wrote it?
I'm forgetting the author.
A quote you strive to live by?
I think this is a quote that is very near to me, but it's not something that makes me kind of strive in an indirect way. But Rumi basically said that you are not a drop in the ocean, but you are an ocean in a drop. And I think what I love about it is how it just shows how connected we all are. And my well-being is dependent on your well-being. And I think that's allowed me to make a lot of win-win partnerships in business and so on. And I think that is one which I believe we are not just our physical beings that are very separate, but we transcend and we have this metamorphosis on another level.
If you could resurrect 3 people from history to add to your personal board of advisors, who would they be and what would be the first question that ask them?
I would say Muhammad Ali, because he's been super inspiring in terms of having a lot of belief in yourself, no matter what. He's a black guy living in a very racist US at that time, and him to just have that belief just makes me not have any excuses to have belief in myself. So I think he's someone that is super inspirational. The second one would be coming from Muslim faith. I think the Holy Prophet for us he is someone that has had the biggest impact as a person while being alive. So I think in the history of humanity, no one has ever had such a big empire, influence, etc., that has been long lasting so long. So that would be the second one. And then my grandfather, I think he's impacted me a lot. He was basically in parts of 2 wars, got the highest medal of honor that you could get from the country, had an insane life that he lived with parachuting into another country while an active war is going on, and being very reflective as well. So I think his journals and diaries are some that have really impacted me a lot. So I think they'd love to have him as well answering and to ask.
What question would you ask?
I would say, would it be in terms of business or just in terms of life?
You liked your advisor board.
I would say to Muhammad Ali, because he was quite an intellectual at that time while being one of the greatest athletes as well. Would love to learn from him how he balanced a lot of intellect and these philosophical discussions while having an insanely demanding career. So that whole work-life balance that he had, which is remarkable because he's the most influential athlete in the world. So how he was able to keep two things that are not, your, as a political activist, it doesn't help your boxing, but how you have managed to keep those two things together, I think would be one thing that I would be love to have. And to my grandfather, I'd love to ask him. I think there's definitely a certain level of me trying to live up to his name, his legacy to a degree. So I think this is definitely one thing that drives me as well. So would love to just hear from him how he feels about my life and his thoughts on, outdone, and what he would like to kind of see more, because I think definitely there is a certain aspect of gaining his approval. It's the back of my mind that still kind of pushes me forward. And then I think towards the prophet, that's a very, very massive figure who has led a very influential life. I think over there would love to also ask this question about the current spiritual crisis that we are facing. And I think there's a lot of different questions where our current generation is not that religious, but we have not, and science hasn't been able to answer those questions as well about the meaning of our life and so on. So I think would love to get his perspective on the current modern day and age, and based on everything that we have learned and the way that our lives are, and how he views how the current, you had to take like modern Islam, what would it really be? Because I think Islamic faith has been hijacked by a lot of different scholars and imams and so on, but it's always in its essence being very different religions. So would love to just take his take on how he would see the ideal Islamic faith practiced in this day and age.
If by a miracle the next minute or so would go viral and all the world leaders would see it on all their phones from all, what would be a message you would convey towards that direction?
I think we have a massive lack of empathy at the moment, which is heating up the temperature a lot. We're leading to a lot of wars at this point, and we need to understand what makes us similar as humans rather than what divides us. And I think the more that we can do more on raising empathy is something that I would love to support and contribute towards.
Spend a lot of time on graveyards due to my venture. Get inspired sometimes from, and they have sometimes a one-liner of every an epitaph. Like, what would be yours? Have you ever thought about this, and What's something that came to your mind that would be great about your resting place?
I think I would love to be remembered for someone who strived hard to know who he was. And ideally, that impacted the world in a positive way. But discovering yourself and having that have a net positive impact, I think is something that is something that's very close to me. And I would, if I have to be remembered in it is a certain way.
Okay, last question. If we would equip this bro with an avatar, if you're still a ghost that would appear, what message would the pilgrim found if they find your grave? As like a time capsule or something, message that could be preserved for future generations that would appear if they find your grave?
I think there are much smarter people that have written a lot of different books on this, but what we are all striving to do is to connect, to find meaning. Ever since we come out of our mother's womb, that first cut of the umbilical cord, you're trying to connect with someone or something, whether it's our work or someone, and understanding what your connections are and strengthening them, I think is something that would be very timeless. It's our innate human craving to feel connected to anything, from an ideology to some material thing to some person, and ensuring that you have those strong connections just is something that is super meaningful.
Fascinating that one of the things that maybe can unify us is not an answer, but a question that will remain unsolved for many more decades or centuries to come, is why are we here, individually and collectively? For those who are listening, you've been very generous with your time and advice today. How can we help you, and how can we find you to stay in touch with you and your ventures?
So I think right now my time is spent a lot on the AI and travel. So try and see how search and travel as fundamentally.
If you say the domain so people know where to check this out, because I find it utterly fascinating what you're doing. It's quite disruptive, and it's like, could you tell us like?
Definitely. It's Layla.ai. It's Layla.ai.
That's a crazy domain, by the way. You guys guided me.
And you're really trying to build the future of how travel, discovery, and booking is going to be. And would love to connect with anybody who's working in this domain or would like to contribute in this area. I'm super active on LinkedIn, so I think over there, happy to answer anyone that wants to reach out and have like.
How do we find you on LinkedIn?
Saad Saeed. I think my name should hopefully come up. That's a very common name, but could be the best way.
There are a few things. I think you're one of the most uncommon individuals I've ever met. Thanks so much for making an appearance on the show. For everybody who listened, thanks for tuning in. I know these conversations are long, but take some time to unpack the wisdom of the guest that you shared today. I definitely feel I'm a very person that at the beginning of this conversation I have lots to learn here. Looking forward to you guys turning into the next episode. Thanks so much for supporting the show. Thanks so much for making an appearance.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity, Daniel.